Joseph continued, "This messenger proclaimed himself to be an angel of God, sent to bring the joyful tidings that the covenant which God made with ancient Israel was at hand to be fulfilled, that the preparatory work of the second coming of the Messiah was speedily to commence, that the time was at hand for the gospel in all of its fullness to be preached in power unto all nations, that a people might be prepared for the millennial reign. I was informed that I was chosen to be an instrument in the hands of God to bring about some of his purposes in this glorious dispensation. I was also informed concerning the aboriginal inhabitants of this country, and shown who they were and from whence they came, a brief sketch of their origin, their progress, their civilization, their laws, their governments. The remnant are the Indians that now inhabit this country." This book also tells us that our Savior made his appearance upon this continent after his resurrection. The Book of Mormon is a record of the forefathers of our Western tribes of Indians. By it we learn that our Western tribes of Indians are descendants from that Joseph that was sold into Egypt, and that the land of America is a promised land unto them. From this time forth, Joseph continued to receive instructions from the Lord, and we continued to get the children together every evening for the purpose of listening while he gave us a relation of the same. He would describe the ancient inhabitants of this continent, their dress, the mode of travel, the animals which they rode, their cities and their buildings with every particular, their mode of warfare, also their religious worship. This he would do with as much ease, seemingly as if he had spent his whole life with them. On June the 2nd of 1834, Joseph Smith, along with several members of the now famous Science Camp, crossed the Illinois River, camped on the west bank. The next morning, on June the 3rd of 1834, Joseph with several other brethren visited a prominent mound on top of the bluffs overlooking the river, which had been located the previous day by a reconnaissance party. This location today is approximately a mile south of Valley City, Illinois, on what is now known as Naples-Russell Mound number 8. Joseph Smith went up on this mound with the 12 brethren, 8 of which then wrote this down in their personal journals. Joseph Smith asked for a shovel. They dug down approximately a foot and then found some bones. Within the bones, there was an arrowhead. And this arrowhead, then, when they pulled it out, it was made of black Yellowstone obsidian. He said, "The visions of the past being opened to my understanding by the Spirit of the Almighty." He says, "I discovered that the person whose skeleton was before us was a white Lamanite, a large, thick-set man, and a man of God. His name was Zelph. He was a warrior and chieftain under the great prophet Onondagas, who was known from the hill Cumorah or Eastern Sea to the Rocky Mountains. He was killed in battle by the arrow found among his ribs during the last great struggle with the Lamanites and the Nephites, the whole of our journey in the midst of so large a company of social, honest, and sincere men, wandering over the plains of the Nephites, recounting occasionally the history of the Book of Mormon, roving over the mounds of that once beloved people of the Lord, picking up their skulls and their bones as a proof of its divine authenticity." Now, the Hopewell Mound Building people, according to mainstream archaeological timeframes, their civilization flourished between about 100 years before Christ and abruptly ended approximately 400 AD. And it came to pass that the army of Coriantumr did pitch their tents by the hill Ramah. And that's the same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records unto the Lord which were sacred. 1 p.m. Held council with the Indians, Sack and Fox, in my back kitchen. They had replied, "Great Spirit wants you to be united and live in peace. I found a book," presenting them with the Book of Mormon, "which told me about your fathers, and Great Spirit told me. You must send to all the tribes you can and tell them to live in peace. And when any of our people come to see you, treat them as we treat you." There were a few last events that gave his, meaning Joseph Smith's, career symmetry. He had begun preoccupied by the Lamanite and interested in the West. And his final days had similar themes. 5 days before his death, Smith and his closest associates passed over the Mississippi River. Standing on a small house frame, he spoke to his followers before going to fateful Carthage. You will yet be called to go to the strongholds of the Rocky Mountains, Smith predicted. You will gather the red man from their scattered and dispersed situation to become the strong arm of Jehovah. The millennial Book of Mormon expectation of the Lamanite, so bright and exciting at the start, became in the course of events not just a promise, but a burden. The demands of this obligation brought church members from New York State to Missouri and began their movement to the west. In a millennial outburst of faith, the first Mormons had sought the remnant, and their quest shaped their movement's history.